TNA can address these issues, right? We can create employment. We can look after the burning issues in the north and the east much better than this government can, because we have a plan. We don't need Fitch to tell us that our economy is failing. I think it's very obvious, but we need to do. The government needs to do things to address this failing economy, as opposed to distracting people with this nonsense like this Dhammika Penny and all that nonsense.
You did state that there was a lot of land grabbing by certain political elements in the north and in the east. Who is responsible for this?
There's so many examples that I can give you about these things, but most of them are done for minor, cheap political gains.
You are the youngest elected MP of the TNA and the opposition. How would you do things differently?
To do things differently, I think we need to believe that change is possible. If we all, believe that this country cannot be changed and this is our fate, I think we are all going to get stuck. So I think be very optimistic, voice out our opinions, and stay away from corruption. Already I have been approached by a few people to shut me up.
Welcome everyone. You're watching another episode of Conversations with Alanki. On today's episode, I will be in conversation with the youngest elected MP of the opposition and the TNA. In today's episode, I will be in conversation with Shanakyan Rasamanika. Welcome.
Hi Alanki.
Thank you for being a part of this conversation. There are many things, Shanakyan, that I would like to discuss with you, but I would like the focus of this conversation to be on the plight of the people in the north and the east. There's no doubt that people across the country suffered for 30 years due to the civil conflict. But the people in the north and the east paid a heavy price, and you work with these people. What do you think are the most compelling issues that these people face today?
Thanks, Alanki, for having me on the show. First of all, I'd like to wish everybody a Happy New Year for 2021. So if you look at the issues of the people in the north and east, they're very similar to the issues that are faced by everybody else in the country. But obviously, the government administration network and the development arm of the governments, successive governments in the last 30-40 years haven't done a lot of work in the north and the east in terms of development. True, there was some infrastructure development that was done post-war in 2010 to 2015. But I believe that those infrastructure development programs also didn't really address any of the economical issues. So true, there are roads, true, there are railway stations and all that, but I think to create an income for the people, I think that is the biggest challenge, because if you look at the number of youth who are going behind, politicians to get government jobs, it's unbelievable. Entrepreneurship is unheard of, right? So, and there's also a lot of women-headed families, so where they've lost the husband. So I think Batiklo has about 20 to 30, 40,000, if I may not be mistaken. So 40,000 odd women-headed families. So, it's very hard to, create jobs for these people, because there are no ports. There's a lot. There are these sort of issues need to be addressed. I think the main issue is that as opposed to the south, accessibility is still very less. So if we can increase accessibility, I think we can address some of the burning economic issues by, even if you say, for an example, why would someone set up a factory or a manufacturing plant in the north or the east when they can easily buy a plot of land somewhere in the south? So the main issue is the economic issues that they face day to day, but on a daily basis. But to address all these, I think you can't just address economic issues without addressing the political, the outstanding political issue. It has been an outstanding issue for 72 odd years. So unless you address this issue, it's like putting Band-Aid on an infected wound without taking antibiotics. So you need to address the burning issues, and then I think the other issues will sort themselves out.
So do you feel that 10 years after the war has been concluded, that the issues of these people have not been resolved?
Issues haven't been resolved because the whole reason behind us contesting for parliament, say the Tamil National Alliance, on our election manifesto, we have mainly focused on political solutions. So when we say political solution, I think a lot of people fail to understand what exactly the issue is. But I think 10 years later, the issues are still there. I mean, I believe there is no way that the government, any government can, solve some problems without solving the most important problem, which is the problem of the national ethnic question. So this needs to be addressed, and every government, and this present government is shying away from even owing up to there being an issue, right? So 10 years later, I think it's only gotten worse. But there is, people are showing resentment to the TNA as well, because we haven't been able to deliver the promised political solution for 72 odd years. Our party is 71 years old now, the Ilangai Thamarasa Katchi. So I think 10 years later, yes, the issues, 10 or 11 years now, 11, 12 years almost now later, the issues are very much still there.
You did mention that there are ethnic issues that the government is not ready to deal with or even admit. What do you suggest?
I mean, it's very simple. It's a very simple matter that has been complicated. Sri Lanka constitutes of different people with different ethnic backgrounds, different cultures. So if you look at Tamils and Sinhala communities, Tamil speaking and Sinhala speaking people, their cultures are different. Everything is different. But to live in a united Sri Lanka, to live as Sri Lankans, I think all ethnic communities need to be respected. Now, say for an example, if you look at people who live in the north and the east in the last few months or so, even basic remembrance days were not allowed to be held. Why? I mean, they boast about one country, one law. Look at the Muslims. Their final rights are being taken away. They're not even allowed to bury their loved ones according to their religion. So, I mean, since our program's only 20 minutes, I want to keep it to the point. But, the government needs to listen and address these issues without shying away, because, I mean, it's really fantastic to use these issues to come into power. But this is definitely not a way to try and stay in power. You need to address issues and solve them, rather than creating more issues to stay in power. The country is going to go back. We are all going to go back. I mean, we are already behind. If we look at Asia, I think we are far left behind compared to other nations in terms of all industries. So we have so many resources in this beautiful island, and I think for cheap political gains, these issues are not being resolved. So I think if you'd ask me what can be done, just say it out as it is. Don't create a boogeyman. Don't artificially create issues just for for you to stay in politics or in power.
I have to say I agree with you on what you said earlier about how there are so many women who had families now since they've lost their husbands. Because I did make a trip to the north a couple of years ago, and I was surprised and saddened by having met so many women who actually lost their husbands to the war, and they've had to support their families, and they actually struggle to make ends meet. Do you feel that as a party, the TNA can play a role in improving or uplifting their lives?
Well, if you ask us, we have been asking for political autonomy. Now, let's say for the provincial councils, right? If you take the northern and eastern provincial councils, the vested powers within provincial councils through the 13th Amendment to the Constitution are not implemented, right? So, say even like financial, let's say grants, we are able to bring grants in if we are the ones who are going to decide how these grants are used. If the grant has to come through the central government, sometimes the grant might not even end up in the Eastern Provincial Council if we bring a grant, and there's so much duplication of administration, and there'll be a cost. So we have so many people who are interested in bringing investments into the country, bringing projects into the country, to create jobs and to create employment and so on. But without the political question being addressed, now if you look for take for an instance, people who left Sri Lanka in 1983 due to the civil riots, the ethnic riots that happened in 83, are in plum positions now around the world.
Absolutely.
I spoke to someone who was at Silicon Valley. They were talking about bringing investments related to IT to Vanni. So, but what their fear is, they feel that since 1983, the country hasn't gone forward. What if there's another unrest in another couple of years? Some guys decide that, they need to come back to power, create an unrest, attack a minority. Like, I feel that today the Muslim minority is being severely attacked and being uh, made guinea pigs just just for political mileage. So if these issues need to be addressed, so that is why I keep saying TNA is pushing for, has been pushing for, will push for a political solution, or like a permanent solution where all communities can live in peace and harmony, right? 13th Amendment, the provincial council system is only a starting point. It's from we have to build devolution on that. So we know what's best for our provinces. We know what's best for our districts. Even provincial council chief ministers from the southern province and in the south have said that provincial councils need to be given more power. So if you give this power, we can. I mean, if you look at Trincomalee Harbour for an instance, if the provincial council had the powers to do so, they would have developed it into being a thriving, booming port. Whereas we have a dud port doing absolutely nothing in Hambantota, right? And we are forcing people to bring their cargo through Hambantota just so that there is income. So now, when a car imports a car, and in the last year or so, they were unloaded in Hambantota and they had to drive them up to Colombo. What a waste of resources. Why? Because they had created. But if you look at Trincomalee as a port, with a natural port, it's just a little bit of money to be spent. If the Eastern Provincial Council had the power, with our limited time, it's very hard to get into specific details, but the TNA can address these issues, right? We can create employment. We can look after the burning issues in the north and the east much better than this government can, because we have a plan. So, it's just that we need to come to a solution.
Moving on to our next question, I would like to know your views on the economy of Sri Lanka. Agencies such as Fitch have downgraded Sri Lanka on the growing debt repayment concerns. However, certain government elements actually say that these figures are highly exaggerated. What are your views on this?
Well, I think it's very obvious. I don't think we need Fitch or anyone to give us ratings right now, because if you just look at it, when I moved back to Sri Lanka in 2013, I think a US dollar was 135 odd, and today it's hitting almost 190, right? If I'm not mistaken, about 188, 199. We have a failing economy. That's no secret. It's common knowledge. I think even a child should be able to say that. And COVID is a pandemic that has hit the entire world, right? But it's unfortunate that we are now, if you look at New Zealand, recently I saw a rugby match where there were 40,000 people who attended the rugby match with no social distancing, no masks. Why? They're an island as well. How can they do that while we are struggling? I think the reason why this year, this COVID first wave, second wave, and now maybe with these Ukrainian tourists, we might have a third wave, right, is the inability of this government. The first wave happened because the government was so keen on ensuring this parliament elections happened. They didn't worry about public safety. They kept the country open till the nominations were closed. Nomination dates were done. That was the 19th of March, and locked the country down for a couple of months. And by then the virus had already gone into a few clusters, and we were shut down for 2 months. And that's how the economy started failing this year. And then the second wave with the Vinuangoda cluster. It's funny how even recently I was watching a media statement saying that they were saying, if I may say in Sinhala, පොකුරු තුනට අයිති මුළු සමස්ත සංඛ්‍යාව 20000ක්. So they're still not willing to admit that this virus has transmitted into the community. They're still trying to say that the virus is still from these 3 clusters.
And there is no community spread.
Yeah, but and there are cases from all around the country. They're sticking to that. That is how now the economy has been failing for the last couple of years. Now the Ukrainian tourists have come, right? And and I don't know what's going to happen if there might be a third wave created by this government. So the second lockdown didn't happen. Why? Because the 20th Amendment was needed to be passed at Parliament. So, the economy is failing. That is very clear. But I don't think, instead of addressing things to, turn this economy around and to uplift the economy, the government is focusing on, look at this Dhammika Penny thing. The country is running behind some Mason bars who has created a penny and the health minister is endorsing it. I mean, how can we blame the people for lining up outside his door? I mean, instead of focusing on economical development, I mean, if you look at the IT sector, in Malaysia and all, 45% of their service income per year is based on IT. I think ours is, I don't even know how many IT firms that we have set up in the last, I mean, we have missed the IT boom. So to develop these, I mean, we don't need Fitch to tell us that our economy is failing. I think it's very obvious, but we need to do, the government needs to do things to address this failing economy as opposed to distracting people with this nonsense like this Dhammika penny and all that nonsense. So that's my take on this economy.
How do you suggest that the government, I mean, as a young MP, how do you suggest that the government should uplift the economy?
I mean, maybe look at the resource. We have so many resources in this country, without letting people, manipulate, the resources into deals. Be more transparent. I think be more transparent. If our credibility goes up, there'll be more foreign investments that will come into the country. Focus on sectors that the entire world is focusing on. Look at IT. I mean, IT is one of the main industries. I mean, if the IT industry is, we have so many students. I mean, I know so many youngsters who have degrees in programming, software development, and all that. Poor guys are working at communications, photocopying papers and scanning documents and just creating wedding albums. Why? Because we don't have anywhere where they can work, right? So look at industries that can, I mean, look at the fisheries industry. How many, seafood, we are surrounded by the sea. How many processing plants do we have? I think recently in Batiklo there was nearly 205 tons of shrimp that was produced. There was no one in Sri Lanka who wanted to buy that to export, because there are only 2 or 3 guys who can process them. So I can give you so many examples, but we have to look at the resources that we have. We are a very, our literacy rate is so high, right? And the government is giving this 100,000 job opportunities, from the government. So we are making our workforce become lazier. They are going to get paid 20,000 to 35,000 later. And that is why are they doing that? To keep them, as their political henchmen are going to be rewarded for, working for them in the last election. And this is adding more and more burden on the taxpayers. The taxpayers have to pay this 100,000 people who are going to be employed. Instead of that, create entrepreneurs. I mean, I was at Parliament earlier today, and I heard the Venerable Ratana Thero saying that, if this government doesn't know how to do things, hand it over to the opposition. We don't need positions, we don't need ministries, we don't need salaries. We'll give you ideas.
And when you actually mentioned resources in Sri Lanka not being utilized appropriately, what comes to mind is I was watching one of your interviews earlier, and you did state that there was a lot of land grabbing by certain political elements in the north and in the east. Who is responsible for this?
Well, land grabbing is happening on different ways, in different ways. There is state-sponsored land grabbing. That is for the state.
So these are state-owned lands?
These are state-sponsored land grabbing that's done for political gains. Now, if you look at archaeological, sites, archaeology sites, we have to protect our archaeological sites. That's true. It's something that the entire country needs to protect. But the government is using this for politics. Trying to create division amongst ethnic races. So you go into a predominantly Tamil area, and there may be a temple, Hindu temple right now. The government is saying we are going to take over this land because this is an archaeological site. True, it's an archaeological site, but respect their sentiments. I mean, they have been worshipping on this rock for 70 years, thinking that it's Lord Murugan's temple, and now all of a sudden you're not letting them go into that area, saying it's a preserved site. Preserve it, but come to an amicable solution where these guys can go and worship their lords, and that's one way of doing it. And then another way of doing it is now the government is giving people land to cultivate corn, maize, right, and in a pasture land, right, there are 200,000 cattle that are grazing in this pasture land. So, and the government is giving that, and there's so many more. I can keep going. There are some ministers are promoting projects for 500 acres for multinational companies, right? In the north and these, 500 acres, they are going to probably take these. I mean, and there are examples of some companies that have taken lands in the past and the projects have never been implemented. It's been 10 years. So it's just like, government land, at least if we give the land to people who live in those districts, they might be able to utilize it. So, there's so many examples that I can give you about these things, but most of them are done for minor, cheap political gains.
Right. That is a very sad state of affairs. Moving on to our last question. You are the youngest elected MP of the TNA and the opposition. How would you do things differently?
Well, first of all, we need to think differently. I think that's a starting point to make a change, and also believe that any government, anyone in power is only that's the mandate is only given for a period of 5 years, right? Nothing more than that. And this parliament now it's 2.5 years thanks to the 20th Amendment, and one man has the power to dissolve a mandate of 225 MPs that people have elected. So to do things differently, I think we need to believe that change is possible. If we all, believe that this country cannot be changed and this is our fate, I think we are all going to get stuck. So I think be very optimistic, voice out our opinions, and stay away from corruption. Already I have been approached by a few people to shut me up, I would say.
Oh,
Because,
how?
well, when I speak about some issues, I get offered certain things saying, try and lure me into their way. So, and I have firmly rejected those offers because, I think that's how people end up becoming bad people. I think when people start their political careers, they all probably come thinking that they want to do something good for the country, and then they just get carried away. So I think just the first and the last thing as well, I think would be is to believe that change is possible. If we don't believe that change is possible, then there is no point in, even if it's one person voicing, there are so many people in the opposition and the government who believe that good things need to be done to this country and things need to change. But even if it was just me, I think the way I would look at it is just to keep trying. Keep trying. It'll happen eventually. I'm like you said, I'm the youngest MP in the opposition. So maybe by the time I'm the most senior person in Parliament, maybe we can at least by then. Let's hope that things might change. So keep trying is what I would do.
I do hope and wish that you would use your position to help uplift and make Sri Lanka a better place. We have come to the end of this conversation. It was indeed a very fruitful and informative conversation. I will be back with another episode. Until then, do take care and stay safe.